Hey everyone, and I've got George here today to be discussing the all-important topic of accelerating your saxophone playing. Do you ever kind of find yourself like stuck in a rut with your practice, with your progress as a sax player? You find you've been playing maybe a few years, and at first you kind of knew what you were doing, but then you get to a point when you're just stuck in a rut. Nothing is quite working, it all feels a bit aimless, and you just don't know what to do next.
Yeah, I've been in that position many of times, whether it's due to a lack of time being able to be spent on the saxophone or, just barking up the wrong tree, playing or practicing the wrong stuff. So yeah, really excited to kind of go through these topics with you and see if we can help you guys out.
So exactly, so we've actually got 5 topics today to discuss with you. So we're going to divide it into practicing your saxophone, that all-important practice routine, and then essential, getting the right gear to help you along your journey. And then beyond that, we've got finding a very good teacher, and then listening to different saxophonists and going to gigs, and then finally actually playing the saxophone out in the community and having fun ultimately. So let's just crack straight on with it and get on with the first topic. So it's so essential as a sax player to develop a routine within your practicing, and what's really important is that we make it frequent. We're not just playing on a Monday, having several days off and then picking it up again at the weekend, but that we play every day such that we build that level of skill. And then within that routine, we really do need a structure rather than the idea of just picking up the sax, blowing down it and enjoying the sound that comes out. That's all very well and can be fun, but we don't progress when we do that. So if we actually have a plan and a routine in place within the routine, then that's when the progress starts to happen. You kind of know that for the first half an hour or whatever it is that you've put aside, you're going to be doing tone development. And then beyond that, you know that you're going to be moving on to scales and technical exercises. And then after that, you're going to be playing pieces. And I think it just really helps you focus your efforts when you know what you're going to be doing day to day. And I suppose, obviously there's different levels of players watching this video, but if you're that beginner, having that routine really nailed down helps you with your progress, but it needs to be a more appropriate routine for a beginner. So I would put more emphasis for the beginner player on developing the tone. So essential to get that sound going, right?
Yeah, so a lot of beginners might find themselves just kind of running out of air quite quickly. I've seen that with students in the past. And what they're doing is they're kind of just topping up their lungs and then kind of using up all their air instantly. Whereas what you should be doing is incorporating your diaphragm and your like abdominal muscles to kind of make sure you get as much support through the airflow, which is going to in turn help with your tone and your tuning. Scales, of course, it goes without saying, you've got to have as many as you can remember really for your level. As a beginner, you may not be able to have the capacity to hold as much as somebody who's been playing for decades. But you want to start building that up slowly and then...
And in the memory banks, right? So, we're talking just 3 or 4 basic scales, but you want to be learning these by memory.
Yeah, you do. And once you've got those under your fingers, you can start exploring more advanced scales as well, and kind of opening up them scales. And that would be moving into more of the intermediate practice routine, you might want to call that.
Sure. And I think this is really where the conversation kind of opens up, because I think we're talking a lot to intermediate sax players here who've kind of been through all that and they feel like they've done the tone development and the sort of basic scales, and largely all that stuff is under their belt. But somehow, again, as I said before, you're kind of stuck in a rut. Well, the tone development still continues at this stage. You just have to keep pushing it to the next level, right? So you continue to do what you did as a beginner, but you try and use this more. You try and extend out those phrases longer. You start trying to think of other parts of your body and how the tone can improve. So it might be really, this is something that, that I've been thinking of for many years, but as a beginner, I didn't really pay much attention to it. And it's this area here, the throat, really kind of trying to yawn through the sound. So you're thinking of a very open throat here. So it's all very well thinking of the air being produced down here, but the journey of the air continues up through here.
You can shape it in different ways.
You can shape it, but also you can unnaturally constrict it if there's some tension, and that's when it can all go wrong. So so we want to be thinking of the whole thing of starting point. It's flowing through here, and then finally what we're doing here, and that there's not tension here. And if you can remove the tension from these bits here and just have the tension down here, then that is the sort of the basic habit for really developing the tone. And to be honest, we talk about just do the tone exercise as a beginner, but this is a lifetime's work, right? We should still be doing it today all the time.
You'll never regret doing it, will you?
Exactly.
I think as somebody who's been playing for longer, let's say someone who's been playing 20 years, they will probably think, maybe I don't need to do as many tonal exercises because my tone is great. However, you probably find that because you have neglected it for so many years, because you've been concentrating on more difficult areas of the saxophone, your tone might not be as good or up to par as somebody else who's been playing for as long as you. I don't know if you feel like that would be the case.
No, exactly right. And I just feel sometimes you think you're on top of your sound, you've been playing 15, 20 years, whatever it is, and then the next day it's just not quite there. So you just constantly have to be on top of it and vigilant. And things can let you down along the way. We'll get onto it in a later topic, but the equipment, sometimes the reeds can fail you and what have you, and you feel it's not quite there. So we'll address that. But this bit, the whole producing the sound, ultimately this is what it's all about, producing a great sound. Yes, we want the technique and all the rest of it, but the fundamental part of it is that sound. So that just needs to be continued throughout your entire journey as a sax player. And then moving on to the more technical things. So we're an intermediate player. We're thinking how to expand our playing. So as a beginner, it's all very easy just to go, da 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 da, 2 octaves, 2.5 octaves, whatever. We've got all that. But as we were chatting about yesterday when we were kind of prepping for this video, you mentioned the idea of really expanding out those scales, putting in different shapes and what have you, just to build our sort of facility on the instrument.
Have it really ingrained within your head, really, and so there is a bit of a mind-muscle connection between what's going on up here and then what's going on down here also. Because if somebody said to you, do you know a scale, just being able to play that scale isn't enough, in my opinion. You need to know it inside out, don't you? You need to know it kind of upside down, what if any kind of starting point, thirds, fourths, fifths within between it, little exercises that you can do.
And there can be like different ways to you can run up and down the scale, but you can have, like, for example, little enclosures to help you move on to the next degree of the scale. So you can not only be playing all the notes of the scale as you go up in a certain pattern, but you can be kind of incorporating jazz language as you move up and down the instrument. And so once you have that down, and then the next thing, of course, moving on to all 12 keys, suddenly you've actually opened out all sorts of possibilities, because you've actually kind of improved your language on the instrument. And it can also be a lot of fun when you start playing, really cool patterns just on basic scales. So they don't have that kind of boring up and down sound, but they have kind of a really interesting, almost jazz-oriented sort of sound.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think when you're moving things into 12 keys as well, it might be quite daunting to begin with if you've never attempted it. But I think you'll find once you start doing more and more, let's say you've got a 2-bar lick, for instance, if you start putting that into a different key, the second and third and fourth, fifth key, you'll begin to get into a bit of a rhythm with it, and you'll find it a lot easier to identify where you should be moving where your fingers should be falling. That's what I always found.
Sure. No, agreed. And kind of a final point that I would really make in terms of trying to progress you as a sax player is it's all too easy to get stuck behind the music stand. We're given vast amounts of reading material, and that's a great way to learn. But particularly this is more for sort of the jazz players out there. If you're trying to progress as a jazz player and then get out there and play in the community and all the rest of it, and play with other, really accomplished musicians, and you find yourself trying to play a jazz standard, but you just turn up and you just don't know it, it might well be because you have learned that standard by just reading the dots in front of you, and whilst it was all going quite well in the practice studio or whatever, it's not the same as properly learning it by ear. So, and I kind of learnt this all too late in life, really, but it's fine now because I'm getting on with it. Which is to say that from now on, when I learn a jazz standard, I just listen to it and learn it by ear. And doing it that way properly internalizes the tune, the kind of the depth of the whole thing, the harmony. You kind of have to spend a bit more time initially on that process, but it's really worth it in the long run.
It's like dissecting all of the form, isn't it?
Exactly, the whole thing. So the melody, the key things, the melody, really get that down. And it's a whole other topic we won't go into now of how to do that. So we'll talk about that another time. But it's just essential that you know that you should be doing it this way, because it develops the ear and it absolutely kind of cements that tune into your brain. So it's the tune, and then it's the harmony underneath it. So the bass line upwards. If you can get those two kind of key bits in when you're trying to learn a standard, it'll suddenly give you this confidence that, well, you're starting to kind of learn to use your ear more, and so it opens the door for improvising, all this sort of thing. But it just means it gives you that confidence that you can play without something blocking you. So your playing tends to open up, it becomes freer. You don't have this sort of restriction of this thing in front of you where everything can sound very blocky. And you remove the stand and it's all going on here. Suddenly, you just open these doors, the playing opens out, and you can then, as I say, play out there kind of in the field and, to a whole new level and with a whole new confidence, really.
Yeah, and I think if you've never actually done that before, you can start quite simply, can't you? It could even be you're playing with a friend and they play 3 notes, 4 notes, and you just have to identify which notes they are. And if you've never done it before, you might find yourself struggling. You might not hit the note straight away, but we might not hit the right note straight away, will we? Exactly. We'll have to kind of search around for it, but 9 times out of 10, if you move in semitones, you'll find it quite quickly, won't you? So that's a trick that you could kind of put into your own practice. But yeah, how about we move on to getting into the right gear? That would be a good place to go to.
Absolutely. Okay, so it's so essential to find the right gear as a sax player. There are lots of different parts here. We've got the saxophone, we've got the mouthpiece, ligature and reed. But right at the top of the chain, at the sort of business end of things, we've got the reed. And this is the bit that is vibrating and making the sound. So essential to pay some serious attention to this part.
Yeah, it might seem obvious, but you want to make sure your reed isn't damaged or warped in any way. A good way to take care of this would be find yourself a decent reed case. It will kind of solve all of those problems. Worth mentioning that all boxes of reeds, there are some inconsistencies in how these reeds will perform. So it's about maintaining or managing all the reeds that you have in circulation during your practice routine.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, attached to the reed is the mouthpiece. Again, as a beginner, you might not realize the value in having a good performing mouthpiece, because it's so often the case that with a basic saxophone, it comes with a very basic mouthpiece that just does not perform well for you. So if you're in that position, it's well worth upgrading to a really good level student mouthpiece that will just get you on a nice sort of even keel. And then later down the line, when you're trying to develop that tone, you might be several months into it, you might be a year or so, it's really worth paying some more attention to it and thinking about those upgrade options, because it can just make such a huge difference. For example, opening out the tip opening, changing material from a basic plastic one to hard rubber like the one you see in front of me here. And then when you start combining, a nice reed with a good quality upgrade mouthpiece, then the tone can really start taking off and start cooking. It can make a real difference. So pay serious attention to that. Well, then, of course, we've got the sax. Yeah, we've got the saxophone. So essential, right? To have something. Well, first of all, that works properly. That the pads are sealing and it's doing the job that it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We find people coming into our store with a second-hand saxophone they may have picked up online, whether that's eBay or Facebook Marketplace, doesn't really matter. And we'll take it into our workshop, and then they'll be squirming at the fact that they have to kind of part with a good amount of money to get it into the condition of what a student saxophone might have cost in the first place. But I think if you do come to us, you will have that security knowing that our saxophones are set up perfectly, and they're all immaculate, and yeah, they're just going to play really well.
Absolutely, no, good point, well made. And then I suppose finally, that's the entire sort of setup as a whole, but then there's kind of peripheral gear that it's worth mentioning that just makes your experience as a sax player just that more sort of enjoyable and more comfortable. So for example, we've got a nice neck strap here that just, this very flashy new BG strap that I'm showcasing here, I've been enjoying for a few days. So much nicer than some of the basic straps that you often get with like a student instrument, for example. But beyond that, just having nice luxuries such as a saxophone stand. I mean, I find it's great when you're practicing in the studio at home and you just want to put the saxophone down, you want to pick it up later. It's right there, so it encourages you to get on with it rather than putting it away in the box. Having a music stand, you can put your music on there, you're not balancing on the floor. And then sort of
your metronomes,
practice
things like this,
aids
and
like
tuners,
that.
they're so important. You can do so much work with the metronome, just kind of keeping things in time when you're running through scales, or even practicing pieces without any music behind it. You can really get involved with keeping things in time with the metronome.
Absolutely right. So all that kind of peripheral gear really helps with the whole kind of gear in its complete sense, as it were. But of course, here at Sax, we've got lots of very experienced, qualified people who would be very happy to help you out with any specifics on this. So do get in touch if you have any questions there. Okay, as you imagine, it is very important to find a good teacher, but I would pay particular attention to the category of a beginner sax player and those guys needing that extra help, more so than the advanced players, because it's so essential at the start of things when you just know nothing to have someone observe what you're doing and make those corrections. There's plenty of good resources out there on YouTube and what have you in terms of learning, but nothing beats that sort of experience of having someone in the room and observing what it is that you're doing wrong and making those corrections kind of as you go.
Yeah, I think if you're having, say, an online lesson as well, be careful of having online lessons if you are a beginner, because there's things such as posture and general positioning and where your hands and mouth may go, which is going to be you'd have to have somebody with you, wouldn't you, really, to be seeing this in a bit more detail, I'd say, as a beginner. So yeah, visiting people face to face, I think, is a big plus also.
That's right. And I think as you move to that more advanced level where you feel you're kind of basically on top of everything, and then perhaps you have more occasional lessons, because really at this stage you are your own teacher. Yeah. It's so important that we kind of adopt the mindset of the teacher is not going to do the work for us. The teacher observes, sets us work, and then we need to go on and do that work. The teacher is not going to do it for you. And the more advanced you become, the more you kind of need to take ownership of that process of, I know what it is I need to be doing. I know when I'm making kind of technique errors because I've been told this and it makes sense to me. And now I realize that I just need to get on and do that work. And I think the more that you can kind of do that work yourself and things are right, the more you can kind of reduce the frequency where you have lessons. So kind of like the more advanced you get, as it were, your teaching is coming from yourself and maybe other things around you, like sax players that you're listening to out and about.
That's what I was just about to say. You could kind of dub them as top-up lessons, couldn't you? Sure. So if you are doing really well with your practice regime and you might want to check in with a player maybe every 6 weeks or maybe even longer, it really depends, but you've got to be your own boss and manage your own learning at that point, like you've just said.
And then just going back to that whole thing of perhaps that more sort of beginner style player, when you do need that guidance, how do we find that teacher? And that can be a challenge. There's various listings out there, but often they're not vetted, these listings. You could be talking, it could be anyone. It could be a great teacher, or it could just be, someone who's pants. And quite frankly, I think the thing to do when you're trying to seek out the best people around you is to get out there. If you can get out there into the community, and we'll cover this a little bit later, but if you're going out to gigs and meeting people, the more people you meet, musicians who are at a higher level than you, the more people you're going to talk to, you're going to network, you're going to find out who
their recommendations,
the right fit for you. And you're probably just going to maybe try someone out as a teacher. If it's not working out, then fine, you have a few lessons you might then want to move on to someone else. But other than just having, say, one recommendation from someone, and of course you don't know, you can't sort of gauge how accurate that might be, the best way is to really get out there and meet as many musicians as possible, and that way you're going to open the door to hopefully finding the right fit for you in terms of finding a teacher.
Yeah, so that leads nicely onto our fourth point, which would be playing with others and generally having fun within the music world. So there's a lot to be said for the sorts of lessons that can be learnt from playing with other musicians, especially if those sorts of musicians that you're playing with are of a higher standard than you, because then you're naturally going to have to up your game, or it might even give you that kick up the backside, which makes you want to kind of progress and give you that energy to move forward as well. So yeah, I would definitely see if you can find any like local jams, where you can go along. Generally, they're really friendly. They're beginners all the way up to advanced are welcome. Some are free, some you may have to pay for, but yeah, I've done some of my best learning going to those sorts of places.
Absolutely. And just briefly, kind of my story as a journey as a musician, going back to those school years and learning and just being kind of thrown into those school band scenarios and the kind of community, kind of regional orchestras. Well, first of all, I had so much fun doing it. It was just a great social thing, just meeting other friends and musicians, as it were. So I just love that side. But my playing just came on so much better when I was surrounded by people playing the right rhythm in the right way. Your confidence goes up. The quality of your reading goes up because you're just doing it all day, if it's that sort of particular example where you're playing in a concert band or something. So just everything just goes up, another level, sort of all facets, as it were. So absolutely essential to just get out there, take that leap of faith, get out in the community and start playing with people.
Okay, so the final point would be listening to different saxophonists and going to gigs and hearing other players. It must be said that it's not just saxophone players you want to be listening to either. You can learn a lot from other instruments. If you might want to go and watch a decent guitar player or a vocalist. I like to see the saxophone as an extension of the vocals in a way. So a good vocalist you can learn quite a lot from. But kind of a little anecdote, I've always listened to saxophone music, and kind of the people in my life when I was growing up have always said how important it is to listen to lots of different types of sax players. One, because it will help you determine what kind of sound you might want to attempt to make yourself. And two, you can just kind of learn so much about the actual phrasing and, explore different genres because of what wisdom they might impart through their playing. I don't know how much experience you have with listening to lots of different players.
Probably a lot. No, I agree. I love it. In fact, sometimes it's nice to kind of have a departure actually from the saxophone sound. I mean, of course, I'm not going to list all the famous sax players that I've listened to, throughout my life so far. But, it seems obvious, doesn't it, to listen to the greats. And yes, you should do that. But I just enjoy listening to so many other instrumentalists as well, trumpet players, Roy Hargrove, all these guys. It's fantastic. But also just, so that's the listening when it's like listening in your own house, essential. But then when you're out at gigs as well, there's a different energy, isn't there, in the room, and the sound is different. It takes on a whole new sphere. So it's so essential to not just do your listening at home, but take it out into those, whether it's a festival, a jazz club or whatever. But also on that, it might be very tempting just to sort of think, okay, I'm learning the saxophone. I need to go to a jazz cafe or Ronnie's and see, I don't know, Brandon Marsalis or something like that. Fine, do that. But at the same time, if you're more that kind of beginnery standard, it could inspire you, but in equal measure,
put you off a bit, maybe. Dishearten you.
Exactly, all of those things. So you just need to, that's fine, do it because it's a brilliant experience. But at the same time, go out into your community, like we said before, and see local musicians who are just a few notches above you, because the music can still be great. And this is maybe where you want to get to. This is the standard that you might more realistically be able to attain.
It's a realistic step, isn't it?
Yeah, in terms of, look, this is, like, I want to enjoy the gig, but at the same time, I want to be playing with these guys, right? And it's very realistic to actually expect to do that if you put in the work. You know, maybe within a year or two. So go out and see these guys and then talk to them at the end of the gig. And that's kind of how you get like a new network of musicians, friends, maybe teachers, like we were saying before. It all just kind of knits together when you start doing that. So yeah, just essential. Just get out there, listen to those musicians, and it will just kind of elevate you, as it were, on all levels. I hope you found that useful for you, and George and I always like to get together to exactly sort of chew the fat, as it were. And yeah, please get in touch with us, make your comments known on this video. We'd love to converse with you. Equally, come into the store, have a chat with the guys, or online on our help desk. And please, in terms of our videos, do like and subscribe if you haven't done already, and we will bring you more content like this in the future, I'm sure. In the meantime, thanks for watching.